What's up guys, Tommy Bowyer here from Movie Rewind, and today I'm going to be reviewing Casualty Series 35. There will be spoilers in this review, so without further ado, let's get into it. The 35th series of Casualty commenced airing on the 2nd of January 2021 and concluded after 30 episodes on the 7th of August 2021. This was the first series released after the COVID pandemic, which brought the transmission of the show to a halt. I remember watching Casualty during the pandemic, and when it was announced that filming had been postponed in order to prevent the spread of the virus, I was really upset and shocked. But then, of course, it came back, and it came back with an absolute bang. Series 35 is one of the most well-crafted series of the show I have seen in recent years. Every single episode, and there's 30 episodes, feels like it has had so much time and dedication put into it. You can tell that Casualty, in a new world where the COVID pandemic completely transformed the landscape of the NHS and TV shows more generally, they were prepared to show a realistic portrayal of the health service and how it coped during the pandemic. So, as I've said in the intro to this video, there are going to be spoilers in this review. So if you haven't seen this series yet, I would suggest watching it before you watch this video. Series 35 is an interesting series, and anyone watching it will be surprised at how it's filmed, and that is obviously because with the COVID-19 pandemic still ongoing when the show began to start production again, strict social distancing rules had to be applied. So is why in a number of these episodes it looks like the characters are quite far apart. That's because there had to be that 2 meter social distancing rule. So occasionally it does take you out of it a bit, but I wouldn't say it's really a massive limitation or weakness of this series as a whole. As I said, every single episode of this series is epic. You can tell they put so much thought and preparation into it. I mean, the opening episode, the COVID episode, is one of the best episodes I've ever seen from the show. It highlights exactly how the COVID pandemic affected emergency departments throughout the United Kingdom, and they do a fantastic job. I mean, Amanda Mealin gives, in my opinion, an award-winning performance in that episode as clinical lead Connie Beauchamp, showing just how much pressure as the head of the department she is under. But you also see all the other staff. You see how staff are struck down with the virus and no one really knows who's going to get it next or even if they're going to survive. And obviously this results in the tragic death of receptionist Noel Garcia. Noel, at the time, second longest serving character after original Charlie Fairhead. His death was a massive shock, especially the fact that he died in such a tragic way, dying from the COVID pandemic. But I think they did a really good job with that, actually, because it highlights that no one was safe. And actually, when staff did die in EDs during the pandemic, they couldn't really grieve them. They had to just get up and get on because there were still people to treat. So the COVID episode is without a doubt the best episode in this series. But there are so many good examples from this series. I mean, you have Jacob being held hostage by a grieving husband. And then you have Dylan and Faith crashing an ambulance and them trying to get out of it without the ambulance falling off a bridge. You know, these are really great stunts. And I have to say, Series 35, I was a little concerned with the COVID pandemic that maybe the stunts wouldn't be as prominent in the series. But you know what? They proved me wrong. There's a lot of great stunt work in this series which really stands out. A series of Casualty is only as good as its characters though. And it's fair to say Series 35 has some great character-driven stories. 2 paramedics dominate this series. That is Fenisha and Lev. Now, Fenisha's storyline I really enjoy. She's obviously pregnant with Ethan's baby, and the majority of this series sees her pregnancy and then her dealing with being a single mum and then getting back together with Ethan. And I have to admit, I really do like these two together. At first, I was like, I'm not really very sure. I've always preferred Ethan with Alicia, but Ethan and Fenisha, they do make a cute couple. And that proposal scene near the end of the series, it was just so nice. It was so nice and heartwarming. Obviously, very tragic what happened on the wedding day, but the proposal scene was really heartwarming. And as for Lev's storyline, well, I've seen Casualty tackle many gay storylines with a character trying to oppress who they really are and then eventually having to come out. I enjoy Lev's one because of his background. Having grown up in a strict Russian family with far-right connections, homosexuality was frowned upon, so Lev had to try and conceal that, and obviously he's got his wife Faith and 3 children. But as this series progresses, we see how Lev is just, he can't hide who he truly is, and it's great to see his marriage break down with Faith and how Faith becomes really insecure because obviously she thinks that, you know, she might have drove Lev to be gay. She doesn't really know how to handle it. So it's a really interesting storyline, and it does make Lev a very complex and compelling character. Obviously, my only issue with Fenisha and Lev's storylines is they end with the series finale, which sees them both killed. Now, I weren't surprised that Fenisha was going to be killed off because, you know, Casualty never really has a happy wedding, and Ethan can't be happy for long because Casualty writers hate Ethan to be happy for very long. So I weren't surprised that Fenisha was killed off, but I have to say it was a very emotional and heartbreaking death. And obviously George Rainsford, he's great at doing emotional acting with Ethan, so obviously Fenisha's death gave him a chance to shine. I was surprised with Lev dying though, because obviously having just come out and decided that, you know, he might want to make things a bit more permanent with his new boyfriend, and now him and Faith had kind of cleared things up and were on good terms, everything seemed optimistic, and then he got hit by that train trying to save Fenisha and was pronounced dead at the scene, and that was shocking, to be honest. I think that they made a mistake killing Lev off the way they did, because all of that character development that he had been through throughout Series 35 just came to an end with his death, and I just feel like that was a mistake. Speaking of Lev's death, obviously Faith really struggles during this series because, you know, she discovers that Lev is a closeted gay man and that their marriage has really just been a sham. And obviously as they've got 3 kids together, she can't get her head round how this has happened and how she didn't see this. But it does lead to a really underrated romance, and that is Faith and fan favourite consultant Dylan Keogh. I loved these two together, and when they finally got together, only for a brief moment, I was so happy. I think that they really work well together. You can tell that William Beck and Kirsty Mitchell have great chemistry together, so it was great to see that kind of portrayed on screen. And it would have been nice to see both characters get a bit of happiness, because they're 2 characters that don't get loads of happy storylines, so to see them both happy for once, that was really nice. It was a shame how it ended though, with Faith deciding that because Dylan had lied about his alcoholism, that it was just another man lying to her face, and she just couldn't deal with that, which I thought was a bit of an overreaction. But after this series they kind of forget about this romance. I mean, Dylan and Faith are still on good terms, they're still friends, but they just kind of forget about their romance, which was a shame because, as I said, I really enjoyed these 2 together. I thought they had good chemistry on screen, and I would have liked to have seen them both together. Another prominent storyline in this series is the domestic abuse relationship between nurse Jacob Masters and new character Tina. And I have to say, Casualty have done a lot of domestic abuse storylines before, and they've all been really good. This one did feel different because it shows that even someone like Jacob, who appears very strong, very masculine, they can be the victim of domestic abuse. I thought it was a great idea. There aren't many actors, male actors especially, who will act that vulnerable as Charles Venn did during this storyline, so credit to the actor, he did an amazing job. And I like there is an episode dedicated to their relationship during this series, where we see how even if Jacob made different decisions throughout one day, it would all end in Tina still abusing him, which I thought was a great idea because it highlights to audience members that it doesn't matter what you do, you're still going to get abused if you are in that abusive relationship. It's not going to change, so it's not the victim's fault, it's the abuser's fault. They are the one who are enacting that violence towards their partner, not the other way around. So I really enjoyed Jacob's domestic abuse storyline. I thought it was a very different kind of storyline for Jacob to go through, but I think it was one which really showed Charles Venn how great he is as an actor. Jade Laval goes through quite a lot this series because she finally finds her birth mother, obviously being given put into care when she was younger, so she never really got a chance to know where she comes from, and she finally meets her birth mother in this series. And she is also deaf, and Casualty, once again, format breaking. Casualty is really underrated when it comes to breaking the format of TV shows. They do an episode which is partly set from Jade's perspective. We hear what she hears, and we get to see a lot of sign language being used. And I thought that was really interesting. Gabriella Leone is a talented actor, and I think it's great that the deaf community have got some representation on Casualty. Plus, there is an episode in this series where Jade's drink is spiked, and I thought that was an excellent episode. I really enjoyed that, not only because it highlights spiking, which is something which young women, you know, they shouldn't have to go through, but it is something that happens, so it's great that Casualty highlighted that, but it also added a layer with Jade being deaf as well, and how that could also affect a spiking instance. So I think that Jade was definitely a character which stood out to me this series, I have to admit. We do get some new characters join in Series 35. We get Leon Cook, a paramedic. I have to admit, Leon was all right. I mean, they didn't really do anything with him. When he kind of arrived, he was kind of billed that, oh, he's going to be this really interesting character, but he's just kind of there to make jokes and then goes. You know, I didn't really... He was kind of a nothing character, really. He's one that I barely remember. We also have Registrar Matthew Afolami join, and I have to admit, I didn't like Matthew. I didn't like his storylines. Because of him, Fenisha was late for the wedding and ended up getting killed. So, yeah, I don't like him for that reasons as well. But once again, they don't really seem to know what to do with Matthew. He's kind of just there. We also get a few departures. Obviously, we get Noel's tragic death, which was excellent. Consultant Will Noble, he also leaves. I like his exit storyline because it reflects how a lot of NHS staff after the pandemic just decided they couldn't do it anymore and chose to resign. And I think Will's exit really does reflect that aspect of the pandemic well. One exit that I'm not happy with is the departure of clinical lead Connie Beauchamp. Now, obviously, Amanda Mealin was only supposed to be leaving temporarily, but I think it's pretty obvious now that she's not going to be returning anytime soon. And I just think that Connie's exit storyline was underwhelming. Now, I like Grace returning and seeing that mother-daughter relationship. It's been something which has carried Connie's character since she came into Casualty in 2014. But I think that her exit is very underwhelming. You don't even really know that that's her exit episode. If no one told you, oh yeah, this is the episode Connie leaves, you wouldn't know because she just kind of goes, and in the next episode, Dylan's now acting clinical lead. So yeah, I just think that Connie's exit was very underwhelming when you consider how prominent the character has been since 2014. So in conclusion, Series 35 of Casualty proved that after the pandemic, Casualty was on top form and it was still going to be producing quality content. As I've said so many times, Casualty is such an underrated program. It still tries to do things differently. It tries to go into new territory, whereas other TV shows tend to kind of stay with the same stale format. Casualty is always trying to evolve and do something different, and I think that's why I enjoy it so much as a show. So thanks for watching, guys. I really do hope that you enjoyed this review. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe in order to receive great and maybe even improved quality content in the future, and I will see you in another one. See ya!